Retirement isn't just about managing your money. It's about making tough decisions that can shape your family's future for generations to come. For many retirees, especially those in blended families or second marriages, one of the biggest challenges is balancing the need to care for a spouse while ensuring that their children receive a fair inheritance in the event of an unexpected death. Today, let's go over a real-life story of someone that we'll call John, who faced this exact dilemma a few weeks ago. By the end of this video, you'll see how John was able to tackle his concerns and set up a plan that allows him to sleep at night. John came to me recently a bit concerned. He is in his late 60s, recently retired, and married to Susan, his wife of 10 years. This is a second marriage for both of them, and they each have kids from their previous relationships. Now, John brought significant wealth into the marriage, a well-funded RSP, a large investment portfolio, and even a rental property, while Susan's financial situation is different and her savings were more modest. Here's where it gets tricky. John and Susan have pooled their resources to cover shared retirement expenses, but John is facing two major concerns. The first being is that he wants to make sure that Susan is financially secure if he passes away first, and secondly, he's deeply committed to leaving a meaningful inheritance to his two kids. And as John put it, I love Susan and I want her to be okay, but I also want my kids to be taken care of if I pass away earlier than expected. This is a tough situation. John's concerns are valid, and they highlight some of the common challenges retirees face in a situation like this. John is the primary financial contributor to their shared lifestyle, and while he doesn't resent that, he's worried about the long-term implications. If too much of his wealth is used to support their expenses, there might not be enough left for his kids. Let's say John passes away first. Susan could live another 10, 15, or even 20 years. Without proper planning, she might need to use the bulk of these assets that John intended to leave for his kids. Additionally, there's nothing currently stopping Susan from passing on these assets to her own kids rather than John's. It's also a very emotional topic. On one hand, John doesn't want Susan to feel unsupported, and on the other hand, he doesn't want to risk leaving his kids feeling forgotten or sidelined. Balancing these emotions can be incredibly difficult. Alright, so what can we do? Here are a few options that John can utilize to address his concerns. The first option is setting up a spousal trust, and this can be a very powerful tool in a situation like this. So upon John's death, his assets would be moved to a spousal trust for Susan, and she would be able to access the income from the trust and in some instances, a portion of the capital. By setting this up, John can ensure that Susan has the income to support herself in retirement, but crucially, the remaining principal would go to John's children after her passing. So this strategy provides a win-win. Susan has the financial support that she needs, but John's children are guaranteed their inheritance no matter what happens in the future. This is especially important because it mitigates the risk that Susan might pass the wealth on to her own children instead of preserving John's legacy for his kids. However, this is not to say that John can't name his stepchildren as beneficiaries of the trust as well if he so desires. The second option is life insurance. Perhaps the simplest strategy for John to consider is to obtain a life insurance policy naming his kids as beneficiaries. The benefit of using life insurance is that John's kids would be paid right away compared to the spousal trust method. John could pass on the remainder of his assets to Susan to fund her retirement because he knows that his kids would be taken care of. The drawback of this strategy is that John has to be insurable and he has to be able to pay the premiums, which would affect his cash flow in retirement. The third option that John can implement is to keep a portion of his assets, such as part of his investment portfolio, separate from their shared retirement funds. By segregating these accounts, John could earmark specific funds for his children, ensuring they receive the inheritance he intends. This approach offers a high level of clarity and control over his assets, preventing any ambiguity in the future. It also allows John to manage how much of his wealth is used to support Susan's expenses without jeopardizing his children's inheritance. Lastly, we can use a withdrawal strategy. A withdrawal plan outlines how much John and Susan will draw from their retirement funds each year to cover their shared expenses, while ensuring that John's assets, especially those intended for his children, are preserved for as long as possible. For example, let's say that John wants to leave his kids $1 million. We can set that amount aside for them and use the remaining assets between John and Susan to fund their retirement lifestyle. This strategy would need careful considerations for tax implications, which would help minimize unnecessary tax burdens while maximizing the longevity of the assets. Now you might be thinking to yourself, this all sounds great, but what if I don't have a large estate like John? The truth is, the principles here apply to anyone in a similar situation, whether you have $100,000 or $10 million. The key is to have a plan that aligns with your goals and ensures that your loved ones are taken care of in the way that you intend. So if you're in a similar situation, whether it's a blended family, a second marriage, or just dealing with the complexity of balancing retirement spending with inheritance goals, don't wait. These are the kinds of decisions that can make or break your financial peace of mind. For all of your retirement needs, check us out at transcanadawealth.com.